everybody. This is Just Ask Julia, where we share tips, trends, insights, and resources to help you transform your career and elevate your success. I am Julia Holian, and I will be leading today's session on navigating January, the first month of the year, and all the things that come with it. So if you are watching the session live today, we will have a Q&A session after this presentation. So feel free to stay on and ask us anything you want about either today's topic, or it could be about resumes, LinkedIn, networking, interviewing, or really anything that's career development related. We are always happy to help. If you are watching this as a recording, feel free to click the link in the description below, and you will be able to sign up for future Just Ask Julia sessions where you can ask us questions live as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is the new year. And some people come to us and say, you know, it's the new year and I don't really feel any different. So if we go right into one of the songs for those millennials out there who like the Death Cab for Cutie music, the New Year song, the lyrics are, so this is the new year and I don't feel any different. And so many people say that that's kind of how they feel. I think those lyrics, they've kind of stuck in my head because it captures something that we have been hearing a lot of right now, especially from people navigating a job search or some kind of a career transition. A lot of people look at January and think January is supposed to bring clarity or motivation, or at least some sense that things are kind of moving again. But for a lot of people, this doesn't necessarily happen. What actually, is kind of going on is, when it doesn't happen, like people assume something's wrong with them, or, how they're approaching something. My reaction is, nothing's broken. What's actually happening is when direction is fuzzy, which happens to a lot of people coming out of the holidays, and you've sort of taken a little bit of a break. You come out of that and direction is a little fuzzy, and movement then is kind of inconsistent. Action is inconsistent. It doesn't build, and then you don't get the traction that you're looking for. Progress that you are actually making kind of feels like it's hard to measure. It's hard to see. So we kind of sit in this place where it's like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. There's kind of this lack of traction. And what that does is the combination of all of this creates this hesitation, not because people don't want to move forward, but because they're not sure how to do it in a way that makes sense. So, when you think about, how am I going to sort of navigate January? How do I get back into the rhythm of things? How do I feel like I'm going to make some traction? We're going to talk about that today. So, hang on. So, what did that just do? Okay, sorry. So why does January feel big? So January comes along and everyone's talking about that new year, the new you. There's this pressure to have a plan. People keep asking you what you're doing. You feel mandated to have a renewed burst of energy and enthusiasm. There's often comparison to others. We all tend to do that. So even when you're not actively doing it or seeking that, we do kind of compare, like, well, this other person, got interviews, or this other person got a job, or this other person is doing these things, and maybe I should be doing that. So in a job search, it gets really hard. Like, it's hard to measure your progress. And I think one of the biggest frustrations, and we're going to talk a lot about this today, is that lack of feedback of knowing, am I doing the right things? Am I making any progress? Am I seeing any kind of results? And so when effort doesn't turn into something visible, tangible, obvious results, people start second guessing what they're doing and the decisions that they're making. So when we look at these results, this over time hesitation, which is where a lot of people sit in January, reduces action. And when you have less action, you have less momentum, and slower momentum affects your confidence, affects your decision making. So let's talk about what stalled momentum, or what stalls momentum, and what affects your confidence, particularly at the start of the new year. And then let's focus on how to move forward without waiting for everything to feel clear or settled first. Keep in mind, this is not about forcing motivation. So if anybody's feeling unmotivated right now, we're not trying to like push that. It's more about creating movement that makes the next step easier. So, why confidence drops? One of the most common questions that I hear is, why does my confidence feel lower now than it did earlier in my job search? So I work with a lot of people who may have been, laid off or changed jobs or something back in September, October, November. And when they came out of that, they were like, I'm on fire. I got all these things. I know exactly what I'm going to do. And so they sort of power through that. And then they get to January and they're feeling like, because I'm 3 months, 4 months into this, I just don't feel like I have the same confidence. So I would tell you first that the answer isn't usually that it's about skill. It isn't about experience. It's not even necessarily your process. It's that extended uncertainty. And this is a phrase I've been using a lot lately because people, for a lot of you, if you're in a job search, the job search is taking a little bit longer. And so that extended uncertainty is kind of messing with your head. When you're taking action or making decisions and you're not getting clear feedback, when you're not sure what's next or whether your effort is paying off, confidence naturally starts to erode. It is not a personal shortcoming, so don't take it personally. It's just what happens when people are asked to operate for an extended period of time without enough information or feedback or validation. So, for example, if you've been applying to jobs over and over without any response, it is natural to wonder, am I doing something wrong? Is my resume bad? Do they not like me, even though they don't even know who I am yet? That lack of information or lack of feedback makes our heads just spin. And after a while, it can make us come to a complete stop, which is this hesitation. So we kind of feel exhausted. We've been running fast and feeling like we aren't getting anywhere. Top that with pressure from lack of income or dwindling savings or people constantly asking us, how's it going? Or, what are you doing? This makes us feel like the stakes are getting greater and our confidence takes a hit. Another thing that affects confidence is the gap between the effort that you're putting into something and the visible, measurable progress that you want to see. So you can be doing all of the right things, applying, networking, preparing, and still not see immediate results. And when that gap stretches out, people start questioning themselves instead of the process. But lack of process, or I should say progress, lack of progress in the short term doesn't mean your lack of ability or your value. It usually means that the system that you're operating under is unclear. Now, put a pin in confidence and say what kind of even tacks onto that is pressure. The pressure that we feel at the start of the new year can be pretty great because at the start of the year, there's usually this unspoken expectation that you should be able to articulate a very clear direction of what you're doing, even if you're still in the middle of figuring out. The pressure when people are asking you, what are you doing and how is it going? And have you done this and have you done that? It's a lot and it kind of messes with us. That pressure even raises that perceived, the stakes of every decision that you make. Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? Is this going to lead to this or is it not going to lead to this? So when decisions feel high stakes, people hesitate, not because they're indecisive necessarily, but because they're trying to avoid making a move that they can't undo. So think about that because I really started to notice this a lot, that there's a lot of hesitation when people are struggling to move forward is that they don't want to do something that is sort of something that they can't pull back on. They don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to be exposed. They feel pressure to jump into doing things that they aren't prepared to do. And because they don't want to do them, they hold back. So, when you combine a confidence hit with pressure, it can really paralyze a person. I've talked to so many people who can't see success on the horizon of what they're doing because they are more afraid of making a mistake than anything else. So let's talk a little bit more about how some of this hesitation shows up. So, how this hesitation shows up is people often get stuck in over preparing instead of moving forward. If that's you, we're talking to you. I have a lot of clients that I'm working with right now that are in this space. So they revisit their previous decisions, they agonize it over what was right and what was wrong instead of making new decisions and saying, okay, those were learning lessons, those were good to be aware of, but I'm going to make a new decision. And so they wait for this clarity before they take any kind of action. And I think that's one of the struggles in January is that if you're waiting for clarity before you take action, the clock is still ticking. And so you're kind of losing time. So that's what we're going to try to resolve a little bit today. So is this, seeking clarity before jumping into action a form of avoidance? Maybe. Avoidance happens to a lot of people, but it's also, I think, a very rational response to uncertainty and that perceived risk of things not going well, or worse, not even seeing some kind of a valuable, outcome. So here is an example of a pattern that I see a lot. Someone has spent weeks refining their resume, researching roles, and thinking through options, but hasn't actually had a recent conversation with someone or taken any kind of a concrete step forward. The issue for them isn't readiness because they've been doing all of this sort of busy, heavy work. It's that preparation has quietly kind of replaced real action. On the surface, it looks productive, but underneath, the momentum has stalled. So this tends to happen when decisions start to feel heavier than they probably actually are, and when people are trying to avoid making the wrong move instead of focusing on making a move. So think about that. You want to make a move. You don't want to be stuck. You don't want to have the analysis paralysis. You don't want to be over preparing because you need to make some kind of a move. There's a loop. For those of you who are very visual, I wanted to kind of share a loop that I think ties this all together. So over time, this loop kind of develops. You have uncertainty on the left, top left. So question that kind of leads to this hesitation where you're overthinking. You are looking at the pros and the cons and the good and the bad and the outcome versus the non-outcome. And what that does then is that kind of leaves that reduced action. You're weighing all of these things, so things aren't really moving. And what does that reduced action do? It leads to lost momentum or less momentum. So things aren't moving. And then when things aren't moving, you kind of go back into that loop of, I'm not sure what I'm doing. So a weaker momentum or less momentum makes it harder to rebuild your confidence. Even though your capability hasn't changed, it's what takes us back to that uncertainty. So this is the point where many people say, well, I'm just stuck. So I'm just going to stay here. When in reality, they're caught in this loop, and the loop is what needs to be interrupted. So what do? It is common to want to hold out for clarity before taking action. The assumption is once I know exactly where I'm headed, action will feel easier. But what usually happens is the opposite. Direction stays unclear because action is postponed. So if you are waiting to feel more certain or more confident before moving forward, this is the reset. Confidence doesn't come first. Movement and action does. And that's what we're going to focus on next. So let's look at the reset. So we often assume that confidence needs to come first, that once we feel more certain, action's going to follow. In practice, it usually works the other way around. So movement, doing something, leads to momentum. And momentum will then lead to new information and feedback. And it's that feedback that creates the confidence. So what I mean by feedback is if you apply and you don't hear anything, that's lack of feedback. If you apply and you get a rejection letter, even though it may not be what you wanted, it's still feedback. Because sometimes that says, hey, go back maybe and look at your resume again. And did my resume align with this or not? Sometimes it can, it can say, what, yeah, I probably wasn't the right person for that job. So we're looking for feedback in pretty much everything we do, but we don't always get it. And so, again, that's really where some of this confidence takes that hit. So the goal right now isn't to eliminate uncertainty, it's to create movement in spite of the uncertainty. Forward progress doesn't need to feel decisive. It doesn't even need to feel high energy, especially in a job search or a transition. Forward progress often looks smaller than people expect. It could be just a singular conversation. It could be one application. It could be one decision that you stopped revisiting. So remember, I mentioned that a few minutes ago, that a lot of people like overthink like the decisions they've made in the past. I've done this, but it didn't work. And the assumption is if I did something once before and it didn't work, well, it's not going to work again. We know that this is not true. Not everything repeats itself. So when we're looking at movement, we want to make some small steps. The measure isn't how motivated you feel; it's whether that momentum, that movement, is increasing over time. So I want to show you a model that I was trying to sort of like play with how this model was going to work sort of on camera, because I usually do this individually with a client specifically. But I want to talk about this model called the shrinking decision, or shrinking the decision. So one of the fastest ways to restart momentum is to shrink the decision in front of you. Instead of asking, is this the right move? Ask, is this a reasonable step for the next week? So we're taking baby steps here. You're not committing to a permanent direction. You're running kind of like a short little experiment. Smaller decisions tend to lead to like less hesitation, and less hesitation means that you can usually jump into some more action. So for the over-prepared, under-moved person, the next step isn't more research, more data, more thinking. It's one low-risk action that you follow to completion. That one small action equals momentum. So if you're unsure whether something is worth doing, run it through this filter. Select one thing from your long list of like, I need to do this. And once you select that one thing, ask yourself, does it move me closer to people, information, or clarity? Is it low risk or something that I can reverse, like something I can undo if I think it kind of went sideways? Will it give me useful information and feedback? And if the answer is yes, it's usually a solid next step, even if it doesn't lead to an immediate outcome. So, what I want you to do, I'm going to give everybody a little bit of homework, a little bit of a homework assignment. So for everybody here, I want you to kind of choose your next step for this week. I don't want you to try to do everything, because momentum comes from focus, not volume. I want you to pick one of these and commit to it for a week, or you can pick your own. So for this next week, you're going to say, you know what, I am going to have 2 conversations, or I am going to submit 3 targeted applications, or I'm going to refresh my about section on LinkedIn, or I am going to commit to 2 hours of action, not research, but like things that sort of move me forward. Or you can kind of, pick your own thing. So if you want to pick your own, absolutely, but use that funnel analogy to break down what you want to do on the funnel, funnel questions. So this is what this could look like. So if you're choosing your next step, you might say, oh my gosh, I need to network, apply for jobs, update my resume, post on LinkedIn. I've got all of these things. Pick one. So maybe you want to say, you know what, I'm going to focus on networking. So when I focus on networking, it moves me closer to people, information, and clarity. And to exercise that, to get forward in that, I am going to write for networking. It's low risk, it's reversible, it's productive. I can use them over and over. And so that's your next focus. Then you're going to email 10 people. So find 10 people that you have known in the past or you think would be able to help you, and you're going to send out these networking emails. By the way, this could be a LinkedIn message if it's not an email. So I'm just using that as kind of an example. But by emailing people or messaging people through LinkedIn, you're going to get some kind of information and feedback. Feedback even could be they didn't respond. That's still feedback. Most of the time they are going to respond, and you're going to get some kind of information there that helps you move forward. Will they have a coffee meeting with you? Will they look at your resume? Do they have ideas on what you can do next in your job search? I always have a list of questions for most of my clients when they are reaching out to their network and trying to establish some kind of resource from the people that they're talking to. A lot of times those questions are very simply to ask those people in your network, what are you seeing in the market? What companies do you think I should have on my radar? If you were in my shoes, what would you be doing? If you were to hire somebody, what recruiter would you go through? Or if you were looking for a job, what recruiter would you go to first to help you out? Because those questions don't put pressure on the people that you're networking with, but they always get you some information back. So this funnel took you out of the big, conglomerate of all the things you have to do, and you're just going to focus on the one thing. So for this next week, I want you to focus on one thing that moves you closer to people, information, or clarity. Then I want you to put in a task that's going to be low risk and reversible. And then I want you to push that task forward in such a way that it's going to get you some kind of information. All right, so final thoughts on this. Computer is not advancing. There we go. So final thoughts. January, it's not about getting it right. It's about restoring action and movement and creating a direction that makes sense for you. Consistency matters more than intensity right now. So you want to be consistent. You want to be kind of in the game. You don't have to boil the ocean. You don't have to do it all, but you have to have some specific things that you're going to focus on that will just help you move forward. So you don't have to feel ready. You don't even have to have clarity of what you're doing. You need a next step that reduces the friction for the one after it. It's like you got to take one step at a time. So that's how your momentum is built. So hopefully you got maybe some ideas here that sort of resonate with you and kind of where you are, and have a solution now for what you can do to have January not feel quite so dull, and you can make some progress and feel like you're moving forward. If you need more help, we have a community. You are all, in a sense, in a community, those of you who show up to these monthly Just Ask Julia calls. But if you want more support, use this QR code to take a look at the community that we have. We have weekly coaching calls. We are always putting in different challenges. We have resources, we have tools, templates, guides, a lot of things that we share in there. There's an opportunity to network amongst all of the people who are in the community and ask questions and support. So we would love for you to take a look at that if you are interested in that. And then finally, make sure you connect with us on LinkedIn, because you're going to see more promotions for these calls through LinkedIn. You also get other insights from there as well. So thank you so much for being here today for this. If you are watching live, we're going to actually turn this off and we're going to go into a Q&A session. For those of you who are watching the replay, thank you so much for tuning in. You can click the link in the description and sign up for future Just Ask Julia sessions. And of course, you could also come to our community if you would like to get more tips, resources, and support.